Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Andrew Uden about how wearables like Herd Dog are becoming more cost-effective and valuable to ranches. We are specifically going to focus on how ranchers can utilize them during breeding season and for animal health. Andrew is a seasoned livestock tech CEO who has a pattern of building livestock tech companies focused on biometric data capture, data analytics, and advanced management. He grew up on a feedlot and cow-calf operation in central Nebraska and maintains strong ties to the cattle business outside of his technology companies. Andrew has worked in the beef industry on 5 continents and in every sector of the beef production chain. He lives in Seward, Nebraska with his wife and 3 kids. And if you are a longtime listener, you know that Andrew has been on the show 2 times before. Once talking kind of about a broader level about Herd Dog and wearables, and the other time we talked about his travels and working on 5 different continents. So he provides a lot of value to ranchers. Now, remember that if you go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, you get free ranching resources every week. So be sure to check that out. But that's enough of me talking. Let's hear from Andrew. All right, Andrew. Well, welcome back to the podcast for the 3rd time now. So I always joke with people after they kind of get to 3 or more times, they almost should get sent a co-host hat because I don't have a lot of repeat guests. So I'm excited to visit with you today and talk about kind of some technology and breeding season and herd health. So it should be a great topic. To kick things off, I always like to hear from guests why they bet on the beef industry every day and kind of chose this as their career. So for you, why is that?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Shay. Always good to be back on. And I think it's a good kickoff question. I grew up in the beef industry, and a lot of people say, it's that passion. I think, I have passion for a lot of things, and the beef industry is definitely one of them. Going out and being on our ranch, our feedlot, just sparks something inside of me. But kind of more importantly than that, I think it's the people I get to work with. It's the places I get to go. We got customers now kind of all over the U.S. and Canada, which is exciting because you get to see their family dynamic and how they run cattle and how it can be done in any environment, which is rare. A lot of times you have to massively change your practices or your genetics from one environment to another, and you see slight differences throughout the country in that, but really we're all kind of pulling in the same direction, and we're raising beef. It used to be very divided. I raise calves, I feed cattle. I'm in the packing industry, but now it seems to be that we're all starting to cooperate more, collaborate more. We're starting to develop a really unified product that people want. I can't even tell you how many people have asked me for freezer beef in the last month, leading up to Christmas. So we've kept our butchers busy, and still that family dynamic even of, Andrew's family has a ranch, we're going to call them for beef. It's a big industry, but you still have that small connectivity, which is really exciting to me. And I had a long list of mentors who every time I kind of went out of the beef industry and came back in, they helped me utilize those skills to better, our operations, but also help my friends with their operations and hopefully improve the industry as a whole. So it's one of those where I think the people make the difference. And I think as we get more young people involved, it gets more and more exciting. The industry is becoming more dynamic. So, it's one that I'm going to continue to bet on. I'm not leaving the industry anytime soon.
Well, absolutely. And you are really on the forefront of some of the technological reasons. The younger generation is continuing to bet on the industry themselves. You are in the wearable space right now as far as devices that we can use for cattle. So do you want to talk a little bit about the benefits of ranchers implementing wearables for their management practices, just as far as a system on their ranch? Because it's something that I've really heard of and seen more common in the feedlot side of it, but now we're approaching it more on the ranch end. So I'd really like to hear your perspective on why it's becoming beneficial on the ranch side of it.
Yeah, so I've had several wearable companies. I've also worked in the hog space where not as many wearables, but a lot of microphones and cameras and ways to kind of scan animals. So I've seen where that's benefited not only the feeder, but the breeder. And I think you hit the point dead on. We're finally to the point where, wearables are becoming cost effective enough, they're getting enough range that you can step them into the ranching industry with huge benefits. My current company, Herd Dog, we started in the feedlot space. We've now started trying to focus on ranching as well. You see different trends in different animals. We all have different behavioral patterns. I have a different behavioral pattern than my dad. I've got young kids running around. My activity levels throughout the day are probably different than his. My friends that are, just in college right now, and I was with a couple of my cousins over the weekend who are just finishing up school. They have a very different behavioral pattern to to me in my life here in Seward. So, for us, it was a lot of adjusting the hardware, but also adjusting the type of behavioral patterns we're looking for in cattle on grass and grazing environments. Natural estrus versus synchronized estrus, calving season, how calf health may affect the behavior of the mom. All of those things are really valuable to the rancher because it gives them the same early insights, the same extra management tools, the same extra pair of eyes that we've been developing so long for the feedlots and originally the dairies. They've been able to massively augment their labor, and the ranch, which we're always short on labor on the ranching side of the industry, we're trying to help those producers now as well.
So you made a comment that you said the wearables are getting more range. What did you mean by range? Just talking about different things they're measuring, or was it something else? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so our company takes a fairly unique approach to how we look at data. So data is data to us. We use accelerometer data and we use temperature data, and it could be on a goat, it could be on a cow, out on grass, or it could be on a steer on feed. The data is the data as long as we can get it. From there, range of algorithms changes. You may run 10 algorithms across that animal in a day if you're looking at estrus and feeding behavior and grazing behaviors, things like that. Or you may run one algorithm of just general activity. It depends on the animal that you're trying to look at. So there's a range in how you not manipulate, but utilize the data to give you insights. And then there's the range itself. There's just the range of how far can you read a tag from a reader or from a cell phone. Cell tower technology has gotten a lot better. I drove around pastures this weekend and we had full cell coverage in the middle of a pasture. That didn't exist a long time ago. So that means our base stations can have better cellular connectivity. So that helps with data collection. The base station to the tag has also increased massively. The very early dairy systems, they were a pedometer on the cow's ankle. The cow had to walk by a reader about that far away, and hopefully that hoof would go by the reader and they would pull the data off the pedometer. Then they went to a radio system where they had a radio antenna every 50 to 75 feet, and then they extended that to maybe 150 feet. You've got companies now that are doing long range radio, maybe up to half a mile. They can't collect a lot of data, but they can reach out. You've got some companies doing satellite to track cattle. Our company specializes in long range Bluetooth, so it's more of a commercial grade Bluetooth, which gets us out more to the 300 to 500 yard range, depending on a couple of things: line of sight and number of animals. If you try and pack thousands of animals in that space, your range is going to get a little smaller. But we've got ranches up in Montana, got ranches up in Nebraska, or kind of northwest Nebraska, where they're getting quite a bit of range extension. So that 500 meters and beyond. And we get much further than that just to check the animals in. But I'm talking true data collection. What is the animal doing? How can we utilize it for better insights? And then another tool we've added to our system is we have a light to turn on. So you can also manually go in and say, I want to turn the lights on. So you could be in your house calving cows, and if your calving pasture is, let's say, 200 yards down from your house, you say, I want to look at these 4 cows, and just turn their lights on, get your binoculars out. So it's kind of a cool way to utilize that system. So yeah, I would say range in 2 ways. Range of, how we utilize the data and how we can see better insights into the cow, and then just range of how do we collect that data. That's always been an issue. And as we slowly get better technology, it all comes from, Apple and the big companies first, and then bleeds down to us poor ranchers. As we get better technology to us, it allows us to kind of jump some hurdles really quickly.
Absolutely. Well, it's exciting to hear that range is improving and the cost effectiveness is improving too for ranchers to utilize some of these technologies, whether it's, the wearables you're talking about with Herd Dog or virtual fencing ones, whatever it may be. It's a really exciting time. So today, I really want to touch on kind of the breeding season aspect, as well as, you wanted to talk about animal health too when we were talking earlier. And I'm curious, what metrics are these wearables measuring that are beneficial for breeding season? I mean, you kind of talked about animal behavior. Is there the temperature aspect of that too? What are they measuring that's going into these algorithms?
Yeah, so the main things we measure are total activity, which we measure it's measured consistently and then logged on the tag every 6 minutes, and then every 20 minutes it sends up to the base station in the cloud. So we get 480 data points a day out of that. We're also getting temperature. Temperature is giving us kind of ear temperature. We don't have a probe that goes down the ear. We're not trying to correlate it to core body temperature. We're trying to correlate it to the herd. So if that animal if the whole herd's ear temperature is 50 degrees and it's 10 degrees outside, and you have one cow that's at 72 degrees, you probably have an issue with that animal, right? So we're looking at those trends. The accelerometer data, because it's a little bit more precise, gives us an insight into how that animal is moving. If we see different trends, whether it's a sudden drop off, something like respiratory or gastrointestinal issue, or it's kind of a 3, 4, 5 day lag where that animal is either not adjusting to the new temperature well. You see these big swings when they go through storms and cold fronts or big snowstorms, or that animal is developing some kind of lameness, a bad foot or a bad shoulder. It typically is not an all at once thing, especially foot rot, right? There's a general downward slope. And so we can kind of look at the different things, notice these really finite details, and try and give you insight early on. But, it's pretty basic. It's just like any kind of smartwatch or Fitbit. It's how much are you moving and what's your temperature at? And we do the one step further of we're comparing that animal to its herd. So we get a little bit more insight into how they're moving in relation to their herd, how their temperature is in relation to their herd, because animals are herding creatures. They don't like to be independent. They like to follow the rest of the herd, and they're generally going to follow that pattern as long as they're healthy and as long as they're not having something like an estrus event or a calving event, where that's a more individualized event, right?
So what's the impact of being able to, well, first of all, you mentioned like with foot rot, you can detect it sooner than maybe just if you were going and checking pastures, say, once a week or every couple days. How much sooner could you detect foot rot using, if there's a wearable on them, compared to just your regular checks?
Yeah, it's hard to put an exact number on it. I mean, in the feedlot, we like to say we're 2 to 3 days early. In ranching, it's kind of a new thing we're getting into, so we're still trying to figure that out. But again, if you've got cows up in open range where you're going to see them once a week, and we can, you go out every Thursday and we can tell you on a Monday or a Tuesday that, hey, you've got an issue with these cows. Either you can go up early or you can go up prepared. That's a thing that we're trying to allow people to look at for their own systems. Do I want to go out more often, or do I want to go out with the right tools? And both of those have their benefits, right? It's like feedlots changing how they ride pens when they implement a wearable system. And not just our system, any of these new wearable systems. It changes your mentality of, I used to ride every pen once a day, maybe twice a day in the summer. Now I ride certain pens every other day, and I ride certain pens 3 times a day, because I can see where my cattle are struggling, and I can see the issues that are going on just a lot more easily than I can with the naked eye. And so it'll change the producer's behavior and how they look at things. That's probably the biggest hurdle we face, because everybody's different in how they adopt technology. Some guys, they have a smartphone, they use it to play solitaire and make calls. Other guys are making commodity trades in real time on their phone or on their computer. So, and the two that I just described are both men in their 60s. So, different different behavioral patterns with the same technology, right? We are a service-based company. So, my team, obviously we go out and make sales, but every salesman is a service-minded person first. So, how do we help the producer fit this into their operation? How do we help them learn how to look at data, how to handle alerts, work with their veterinarians? We can give portal access to their veterinarians or nutritionists, anybody they want to see that, and then kind of train, right? It's all about training so that they can figure out, okay, you can do all these things. Here's your toolbox. Which tools do I want to use and how do I want to use them? And I think just that ability to have more tools in our toolbox is what's going to allow us to adjust our operations accordingly.
That's really valuable that you can share that data with, or that producers can share that data with the other people on their teams to help analyze and make decisions with what they have.
Yeah, that's going to be big in the future. I was with a group of veterinarians and they were talking about how they implement it with their customers and one of the old veterinarians in the back said, "Well, I don't know that I want to implement this because every time I get the call, I get to charge mileage to the customer on the way there." And I said, "Yeah, but you just complained that you have to work 80 hours a week and 40 hours of your week is just driving." I said, "What if you could change that dynamic and take on more customers over a bigger area, but not have to spend as much time in the truck?" And he hadn't thought about that. So he goes, "Well, that's a whole different way of thinking about it and a whole different way of serving his customers." It's a mindset shift for everybody. It was a mindset shift for us. It was a mindset shift for my sales team, my development team of we can't develop a silver bullet. That doesn't exist in the beef industry. It doesn't exist in any industry. We like to hope that it will happen, but you're developing solutions and systems is what you're actually developing.
Okay, Andrew, so what do the ranchers see when they, pull up this data, get this data? What are they looking at to make decisions from a herd health standpoint and even with breeding season?
Yeah, so the easy one would be I'm going to kind of pull up some data here. Typically on the app, all they see is, an alert list. They'll see how many animals they have, how many devices they have. It's got a little map of their operation. Similar to a lot of apps you would see for general ranch management. And if they have any alerts, there will be a red bar for health alerts and a yellow bar for estrus alerts. So that's kind of the first home screen. If they then click into those animals, like here's some data of if they click into that animal, they can see the actual data itself coming through their system. This is one I pulled this morning. This is a heifer up in Montana, but you see she's got some downward trends as their weather has changed over right after Christmas. We do see her kind of come back into a normal pattern. So this is her pattern changes, and then you also see her down here under this total operation. You go over here, again, you see her patterns changing, but you also see she's significantly below, on average, the operational pattern, which is this red line. That's her herd. So that's kind of what we look at for health detection data. We also look at when do you retreat, right? If we've gone to a lot of these new drugs, which are focused more on, one treatment and then a 6 or 7 day moratorium. And then if you have to, going back to retreat. A lot of times we'll retreat too early or we'll never retreat and that animal will kind of just kind of put along at a lower performance. And so, all these red lines are our algorithm flagging. The only one the producer would have seen was over here, the very first one. And then as that animal kind of hangs out here significantly under this herd average up here, which is that animal kind of going in and getting K'd every day, we continue to see that animal as he slowly starts to recover. We've got a late flag here just to look at. But this is, 4 days rather than 6 days. By day 6, he's back in line with the group. He's maybe a little bit under the group, but he's following the group pattern, right? And so this is one that once we can see that they're back in pattern, not every animal is going to follow the average perfectly. But what we do need to see, especially if they're getting supplemented every day with cake or hay, or in a feedlot, like a lot of our data we've trained on, we need to see them follow the group pattern around eating. That gives us that kind of desirable pattern to say, okay, this animal is within a healthy range rather than falling out of that. And as we look at, I'm going to go back a slide. So as we look at an animal like this, let's say this heifer was due to cycle here, we would see a much lower activity estrus cycle because we know she's sick going into that cycle. And so that's kind of where, as you're going into a breeding season, you want to make sure they're up here, that that animal is in line with the average and not on a downward spiral, right? I've AI'd a lot of cows. Our family has utilized AI as a tool for years, and it was hammered into us a little bit by the University of Nebraska, and then just personal experience that we had to have healthy animals and we had to have animals on a rising plane of nutrition. So as you see those animals not following the herd or not following the feeding patterns around supplementing or haying, it makes a big difference in how they're going to breed up in their performance. And we're doing a lot of that breeding trial data right now. As we look at estrus is really exciting. So this is another one that these are in a heifer development center, but we see that they kind of have these big spikes, and those big spikes are really kind of focused around their estrus pattern. So, normal activity. In fact, this one's really healthy. She's right in line all the way through. It's like laying a board on her activity pattern. And then you see these huge spikes. So this is one she actually cycled yesterday. This is one, again, she cycled on the 11th. So good, 19 to 20 day pattern. We see variance from heifer to heifer. We've got some we've seen as quick as 18 days, some that are 23, 24 days, so well within the normal patterns of animals out on grass or in a yard like this. And so that's pretty neat to see, and we can see that accuracy over time. Looking out a little further, we also get to see things like missed cycles. So, you catch different cycles and suddenly you miss a cycle. And now we can go in and when I pulled this report, this was last year, when I pulled this report, this cow was 46 days bred. When we actually pregged her, we were accurate to this day, to her last cycle and when she was bred. And so that's what gets really exciting for ranchers. This was actually a dairy heifer, but on ranches, as we look at some of that, and I'm going to stop sharing, go back to just conversation, but as we look at those cycle patterns and missing those heats and then being able to say, at least preliminarily, she's bred, I don't preg check until October on our ranch. That's kind of been my dad's standard forever, is when we wean, we preg check. We have no idea up to that date what our breeding rate is, right? It's every year it's this huge surprise, and we're usually within a ballpark range. But if you have a bad year or it gets dry right in the middle of breeding season and you're low on nutrients, your cows could look great and not breed well. And so, to have an idea of, do I need to leave my bulls out for an extra cycle? Can I pull bulls early? What's it going to be coming into the fall? Should I wean early and try and get some of these cows to market rather than continuing to put more expenses into them? It just gives you another management tool, right? We're watching a set of cows on stocks right now. We know cows on stocks tend to have a slightly higher abortion rate. That's been studied by a lot of universities. It just comes back to some nitrate issues in stocks in different seasons. But, even a 1% abortion rate on a large number of cows, you can see that. So we're looking at, we keep that estrus algorithm on, and usually it's pretty quiet, right? They're all bred. They're all old cows. They're healthy. But what we're looking for is, if one of them cycles, can we see that abortion so we can get that cow out of the herd rather than running her back all the way through the winter calving season and getting to March and saying, why hasn't she had a calf? And you arm her and she's open, and you've just put 3 or 4 more months of feed into her when you could have called her back in December if you knew she had aborted, right? So again, we're not telling people how to run their cows. We just collect the data and we give you insights into that data. We say, well, they're cycling today. If they cycled this morning, if you want to go AI, you need to go AI tonight. If you're doing embryos, they cycled within this window, and in our software you can go set your embryo group for 7 days later, so you can accurately put in those embryos on that set when they cycled. So we're getting a lot of embryo companies coming to us and saying, hey, can we look at this? Can we see how this works with our embryos? That's kind of exciting to the seed stock producers who are doing a lot of ET work, and especially doing ET work that they don't do themselves. They're doing it through a consultant or a veterinarian or an ET company, where you've got to time things right and you've got to make sure people are in the right place at the right time. If we can give them those accurate timing windows, it just makes their success rates go up significantly. So, we've seen wearables in the dairy industry bump your conception rate 10 to 15%. That's kind of our goal, first step goal for herd dog, is to be able to bump at least AI and ET conception rates by 10%. But overall, it's those additional tools, even to cattle on grass with bulls being bred, right? Knowing how long to leave the bulls out, knowing what your general preg rate's going to be, knowing if there's animals you need to cull early because they're not pregnant, just gives you better insight into your herd. Allows you to manage those cows more real time than the few times a year you work them, right?
Yeah, there would definitely be a lot of a peace of mind being able to at least see if, a cow is still cycling, or if she did miss a cycle and then aborted for whatever reason, because we PG later too. And we pulled bulls a little sooner this year than we normally do on the spring cows, because we wanted to tighten up our calving window, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden it looked like there was all this riding. And I mean, we were sweating bullets. We're like, oh man, this is going to be a wreck. And it ended up being fine. It was not bad, but we didn't know. And just how it works out with everything else we have going on, PGing a little later, we're a little nervous. So that would be really interesting to be able to have that data. And like you said, do whatever you want, whether you sell them early or at least put a plan in place to keep the bulls out longer or market them differently. You can do whatever you want with the data, but at least you have it.
Yeah, we've had a couple of producers say, well, I'm just going to wait until they're all bred. If I know generally what my preg rate is on the first cycle, second cycle, so I have the ones I want to keep, but I've got this, maybe 10% over here, the late cyclers that I want to leave the bulls out, get those bred, sell them as breds in the fall. If I can't get them bred, I want to get them out as early as possible to try and preserve some grass for the rest of my cows. And, if you're running 100 cows and you have 5% open, if you can get those opens off, that might be an extra few days for the rest of your cows. Over time, that makes up a huge difference, right? It's like weaning calves early. If you wean calves 2 weeks early, you might leave the cows out an extra month. What's happening with my herd right now, and how can I use that data and that information to manage my herd now and over the next 6 months, right?
Yeah. So kind of staying on the breeding topic, on the AI side, you mentioned that it can show, hey, she's in heat now, so now you know when you have to go AI. What's the advantage of doing that for each individual animal that's coming into heat compared to just syncing everything and kind of getting it done with at one time?
Yeah, so I've run a lot of heat protocols. I've run about every sync protocol you can imagine. Because we AI so many, we got drug into a lot of University of Nebraska studies when they were testing all these protocols. So I got to experience all the different sides. The best one I've ever seen was a sync with a pull protocol, with an observation and time pull. So it's a 3-day sync, and we pulled morning and afternoon for those 3 days. Best conception rate we've ever seen. But we had to have the labor there for 3 days because you had to be watching these animals all the time and pulling them into the right groups. It's expensive. If you had, one guy wanting to AI and wanting to get really good results, it is better to just observe them and pull them over time. You get much stronger heats is what we've noticed, and your conception rates are higher. Sync protocols, you're naturally going to have a lot of non-responders. Cows don't respond to hormones the same way. They don't respond to a lot of hormone shots equally. To this day, we'll still try and pull out the non-responders. We may breed them at the end. We may not breed them at the end. It depends kind of what our mood is that year and how early we're turning the cleanup bulls out. But, you'll see heifers that come in the first day, and you'll see heifers that come in 2 days in. And so if you're going to say, okay, I'm breeding, 70 hours in on X protocol, you're in the bell curve, right? You're going to have some you've already missed, and you're going to have some that you're missing because you're too early. And so there's a reason dairies, they use sinks on embryos, and a lot of them don't sink on the rest of their cows. It's because they want that extra conception, and they have the ability to go paint tails or chalk cows and know that just walking through the dairy. We're trying to give the rancher the same tool of, if you've got your 100 heifers in a pen and you've got a herd dog ear tag in their ear, you just turn on, you have your heat alerts in the morning, you have your heat alerts at night, you turn on this set of lights, you sort them out, you turn on the next set of lights, you sort them out. If you're doing it over a month, you're going to have a handful come in every day. It's something you can do as part of your chores to get them all bred, and you're going to have a much higher conception rate.
Wow.
So you don't have to spend the extra money on the drugs. You don't have to spend the extra money on the labor. You can spread it out, but still get it in a tight enough window, right? So there's advantages to both. Even within a sync protocol, we have a few groups using it for sync protocol, and they'll actually look at it and they'll say, okay, we synced 100 head, 84 of them came in this day, and 16 of them came in this day. And now they just turn the lights on. And they take those 16 out and they wait until they come into heat, and then they'll breed them a day later. And they'll then follow it up over that next 3 weeks with, okay, what percentage actually stuck, and all of the ones that didn't stick, I'm going to breed them again, put another straw semen in them again, and I know because I have this herd dog alert saying they're still in heat, and I can just turn the lights on. So we get a watch for the cleanups as well. So again, I'm not telling people how to breed their cows. I'm just saying we have a tool that can help you probably get a better conception rate just by better insight into what is bred, what's not bred, what needs cleaned up, what can go right out to grass. Mm-hmm. It's a tool to utilize in any operation.
Well, absolutely. And even cows that come in early on a sync protocol, I mean, I know helping my parents, I mean, it was this past year we had quite a few start cycling earlier than the rest of the herd. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, fertility varies wildly, even in purebred cows or closed breeding systems. I remember being a part of a UNL study where we did a 7-day cedar sync protocol in first calf heifers. So this would have been their second breeding. And first calvers respond very different to virgin heifers to that hormone injection and that cedar. And the grad students that were running this were shocked that we had so many coming into heat so early. And I said, they've already had a calf. They've already been pregnant. We know they're fertile. We got to start breeding. And they're like, but we're not supposed to breed for another 36 hours. I was like, we're breeding now. These are our cows. so probably screwed up their protocol, but
yeah, if they're in heat, they're in heat.
Exactly. And it would have been nice to have, we were sitting there all day watching them, right? It was part of a trial. It would have been nice to be able to go and get fence ready in the pasture and things like that, and just have my phone tell me, okay, these 40 are in heat. That's what we're breeding tonight, right?
Mm-hmm. So Andrew, where do you see kind of the future of wearables going for ranchers in the next 5 to 10 years or less?
Yeah, so I think wearables in general, not just my company's wearables. Obviously, I hope people are using my company's wearables, but I think wearables in general are going to be part of a larger ecosystem of technology. They're going to be paired with water monitoring technologies, fence monitoring technologies, virtual fencing, new and different classes of antibiotics and hormones that are all coming to market in the next few years as better tools to help the rancher, but also tools that are separating kind of human drugs from animal drugs. There's a lot of new things that are going to be coming to market, but it's all part of an ecosystem. We know traceability is coming. A lot of wearables will qualify for traceability under new USDA guidelines so that you won't have to have 2 or 3 tags. You may be able to have one tag that does it all. Yeah, it's going to grow. We are seeing more young people come into the industry. You and I are a prime example of that. But you're also seeing a lot of old people retire. And so the younger people coming in are, we're the generation who grew up with cell phones. We grew up using computers in class. We know the value of kind of using technology to our advantage rather than seeing it as a burden. And so I think it's just going to grow. We're going to have more tools in our toolbox. And as we expand that toolbox, it's going to allow us to, produce better beef and have healthier cows. And I showed somebody last year at a convention It was negative 40 back in Nebraska. We were in Florida, so it wasn't negative 40 in Florida, but they were on a welfare committee. And they said, well, you got wearables. What's a good argument for animal welfare? Because that's a big issue to our consumers. And I pulled up cows I had at home in Nebraska that were using our tags. And it was negative 40 out. They were on cover crop. So it wasn't snowing, but it was negative 40, wind blowing, no shelter. And I said, these are Angus cows. Their ears, the ends of their ears were 42 degrees on average. I said, they're not that cold. They're pretty healthy. I said, they're not struggling. You know, I can probably get one of my hired men to go video them, but it's one of those things where they say, oh, they're freezing to death. The consumer would say they're freezing to death. They're cold, but they really don't notice it. You know, if their ear is 42 degrees, their core body temperature is fine, right? So there's going to be welfare issues as well that come up, and having the data from all these tools is going to kind of give us a way to defend ourselves and our way of life and our way of production.
All right. Well, Andrew, my final question for you is, what questions do ranchers need to ask themselves to determine if a wearable is the solution for their operation or can be worked into their system?
So I think one thing we walk through with potential customers, because we need to know that they're invested in it for us to focus so much service on them as well. Because there's a lot of interest, but then there's a lot of people that kind of want, may be too much for them. So we ask them to ask themselves, do I have labor issues? Wearables will help. They'll help in some ways, but hurt in some ways. So do I have labor that understands technology is probably a better question. Am I willing to change some of my mindset or shift my mindset around utilizing this data for more than just one thing? So like I said, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your management issues. It's another tool in your toolbox to know if your cows are responding to feeding or supplement, to know if they're in heat, to know if they're ill going into calving or estrus, to know if you're having issues out on open range. There's a lot of ways to utilize it, but if you're looking for one use case in a year, it's probably not cost effective enough for you. So, does my team understand technology? Am I going to utilize it as a lifetime tool for this animal? And then the third one is just, general cost, right? If you're trying to be the lowest cost producer, wearables probably aren't going to solve a lot of your problems. If you're trying to be a middle or upper cost producer that produces the highest quality beef, gets the high preg rates, has a high weaning rate, and you really are trying to kind of push performance into your herd, this is a great tool to add to your toolbox. Like it's going to give you the insight without adding a ton of additional labor to your ranch. That's why a lot of our early adopters are purebred breeders, right? They're pushing hard on that performance. You don't want to lose a $5,000, $6,000 cow. You don't want to lose that next prospective herd sire. Those guys are leaning into it. There's not enough people to hire, so it's not like they're going to go out and hire 10 more people to help improve their performance and their data collection on their cows. So we augment that. We become their data collection system. We become their extra pair of eyes that allows them to manage those animals better. So yeah, those are the kind of the three big questions that I tell people to ask themselves before they put in an order and say it didn't work,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's my team's issue or my team's, problem to solve, right? If you are a customer, we're a service-based team. We're going to sit down with your management team. We'll bring in your vets if you want them to be part of the discussion and say, here's everything we do. How do we help you utilize it better? That's kind of the core focus of Herd Dog.
Well, absolutely. And what great questions for people to consider anytime they are implementing technology or making a change on their operation. Andrew, thank you for joining me for this conversation today. It's always fun to have you on the show. And for anyone interested in learning more about Herd Dog, I will have a link in the show notes for that. And if you are listening to the audio but wanted to view Andrew's slides, be sure to check out the YouTube video and then you can view it there as well. But with that, happy ranching, folks.